I guess we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. First thing, the first thing on the agenda is approval of the revised August and the September meeting minutes. Anyone have any comments on those minutes? Anyone want to, do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I second.
Okay, motion and second. All in favor, aye, say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay. Guess we'll go ahead to our special topic. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you. So I'm Jeff Guyette. I'm with the Community Action Center, and I guess I need to stand here. Is that correct?
Yeah, we are recording.
Right.
And we'll be posting this.
So I'll make sure I say a lot of ums and ahs. I'll get that down. I am really grateful for Chief Jenkins providing the opportunity for me to come and share with you all. And I know that you wanted to zero in on the topic of homelessness. That sounded like the order of the day. But I wanted to start out first with sharing a little bit about Community Action Center and what we do here in Whitman County. And that is our service area. As an organization, we serve all of Whitman County, but you see us pretty high profile in Pullman because that's where our offices are, and that's typically where the highest need and where we operate from. And we serve the low-income population, low and moderate income populations here in Whitman County. So we provide a wide array of services for low-income folks. And really, if you sum them all up into a couple of topic areas, it's food and shelter. Those are the two things that we try to work with people to make sure they have a place to stay and to make sure that they have food to put on the table and feed their families. So that's kind of the big picture. I did want to draw your attention. I have some of these postcards over on the table. We are required as an agency to do a needs assessment survey throughout Whitman County every 3 years to determine really where the highest needs are and what those needs would be defined as, and then where the resources are as well as the gaps in resources. And so we've worked with a stakeholder group. Vista Corporation is helping to fund this needs assessment, and I'm a member of the Whitman County Health Network, and so they use this assessment also as a health needs assessment for the area. And it's grown. We did it in 2015. The results were really clear that dental and medical care were the two highest needs. As a result, we've been able to draw the Yakima Valley Farm Workers Clinic to start the new dental clinic that's about to open, I think, the first part of November, if I'm not mistaken. So, and the needs assessment also this last time around helped us to form the Whitman County Food Coalition, again, which is looking at the needs of Whitman County residents for food security. So that's kind of how we operate. We look at what the needs are. We try to find and build local solutions for those needs. And if you look in this brochure, it's basically a menu of our services that we provide. And we kind of split them up a little bit between housing and food, just to kind of make it easier for people to see what we do. But we do provide energy assistance for folks who need help with their energy bills. We do provide support services for folks who really, they don't necessarily have a need that we can directly provide, but we can provide information and connection to other services. For instance, we work with Alternatives to Violence of the Palouse, who has a crisis shelter for women and men who come out of abuse situations. That is part of our continuum of care for Whitman County for homeless crisis shelter. And so we work with them to make recommendations and referrals back and forth here in Whitman County. And then we also do homeless housing solutions, which will be the topic. We also provide weatherization work, and we just recently were able, as part of a network statewide, we're able to get funding to do a rural home repair program that's going to be starting up this fall, where we're going to be able to help folks who are living in housing that needs repair to the point where we can't come in and do weatherization services. We're able to make a long-term low-interest loan that's deferred until the sale of that home, where we can do those repairs and then come in and do the weatherization grant work that can be done on their homes. So it's a great way for people to stay in their homes and stay safe and warm and be able to reduce their heating costs. And then the community food side, we have a food bank that we operate 2 days a week here in Pullman, as well as we do some SNAP education or education to school folks up in Rosalia, starting to expand over to Tico. So we're helping with the kids who are on the free and reduced lunch program, understand a little bit more about nutrition and make sure that they have food that they need. As well as have our own kitchen and our own gardens to help with, again, nutrition education, cooking classes, showing people how, and actually it's interesting, we don't necessarily show people, but we invite community members to come and share with one another about how to prepare foods, how to cook foods that are nutritionally valuable that will sustain their families. So that's been a great thing in the last 2 years. We were able to open the kitchen and watch that grow. So that's been great. And then we also have affordable housing throughout the county, here in Pullman as well as up in Colfax and in Tico. We have affordable housing that is available either project-based or just at market rent, where we can house families who really, most of the situations that are toughest for folks is when what we would call the working poor, where they have a job, they're making money, but they're not quite making enough to be able to afford their housing and their food and all the other costs that it takes to live. So we're able to provide that housing with some kind of subsidy for them. We also provide housing vouchers. There's 300 housing vouchers for folks here in Whitman County. Section 8 vouchers is probably how you've heard them referred to. So they help to keep that rent, again, at 30 to 40% of the household income, which makes it more manageable for a household to stay housed. So that's kind of a quick peek at the overall services that we provide. But I wanted to zero in a little bit on the homelessness question because, as you probably recognize here in Whitman County, homelessness is really kind of invisible. You don't see folks necessarily, occasionally you'll see folks at the Walmart or at Safeway with a cardboard sign and, kind of obviously homeless. In fact, this morning when I came to work, a gentleman was riding up to Community Action Center on his bike, obviously living out of doors, definitely dressed for the cold weather. So we do have that here in Whitman County, and I think what we have probably more of, if we have folks who are temporarily displaced, maybe moved out of a place before having accommodations, living out of a car, doubling up with other folks in their housing to try to save some money so that they can get into their own housing. But we do have folks also that come into the area who are traditionally homeless is how you would call them, and we do try to serve those populations. So for us, actually, the number one resource for folks who come into the area or who are currently homeless is actually the police department. We are able to provide vouchers for housing, for temporary crisis housing in hotels locally that we have an arrangement with. And the police can make a determination on the spot as to what the need is and to be able to get them into some kind of crisis shelter short term. And then the deal is that the police also make it clear to the individuals that they really need to come in to Community Action Center for an appointment to kind of work out a longer term strategy to stay housed and to get permanent housing. And as you can see from the sheet that I've passed out to you, in the first 6 months of 2018, we did have almost 80 applicants for folks who came in and were either homeless or at risk of homelessness. And the definition for homelessness is kind of a rigid definition. It doesn't really take into consideration folks who are doubling up. So they're not really considered homeless, although to you and I, that would be considered homeless, I think. So we do have folks in that situation that are at risk of homelessness that would maybe doubled up or in some other kind of alternative situation. We do help those individuals as well. And our goal is always to sit down with the individual, find out what their resources are, find out what their goals are in terms of either if they're not employed, gaining employment, if they are employed, how can they work to get their down payment and their rent put together so that they can move into a permanent housing situation. And to set goals that go around that whole constellation of need that that household might have. If they need food, if they need other services, medical services, we try to get them connected with other resources in the community to do that. As you can see from that 79, we were only able to help 50 of those, and that can be for any number of reasons. Some of them might be that they actually were transient and really not intending to stay in the area. Oftentimes, we can help folks like that who are homeless and actually have resources in another town, whether it's family or friends or whatever. We can get them transportation using some of the funding sources that we have to get them to that place where they have their resource network. And that's critical for us. That's, again, when we sit down with those folks, we want to find out if they're asking for temporary shelter. We may find out that instead, they do have family members in Colfax, for instance, who could take them in temporarily while we work on longer-term solutions. And so we'll work to have that happen rather than using up some of the other resources that we might have to put them in a motel or a hotel temporarily. As you can see, of that 79, 40 some had income of some sort. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean they're working at a job. It might mean that they have disability or they have some other kind of income. It even could be unemployment assistance. But they have some kind of income. And once we establish that, then we can start setting goals for how much they might be able to afford if we found permanent housing for them, and then how we work out the arrangements to get them in that housing. Of the households who did not have income that we did help, all 14 of those folks eventually gained some kind of income source during the time that we worked with them. So the folks that we work with, one of the things that we talk about is that Community Action Center is about building resiliency for the folks that we work with. That's one thing we'll find with almost every household who comes in looking for help is they're pretty resilient. They can find the solutions to the challenges that they're facing, and we just work with them to assist in figuring out what are the best solutions for your household. How can we work with you to find some income source or to get a job or to do some vocational rehab or whatever it might take to be able to establish yourself into permanent housing. I think one of the really, and I listed in there some of the other connections that we try to make folks to services, and that's really critical. And I think one of the most important aspects of what we do is because it is a wide menu of services that we provide. We're able, even if we can't do it, we can make a connection to somebody else in the community who can. And we can help people have hope where maybe they came into us and they don't have any income and they don't have any hope and they've got mouths to feed and they don't know what they're going to do. Just by having that conversation about looking at the resources that they might have, eventually they walk out of our offices with some hope. And the really cool stories are the ones, because we have that wide array of housing services, we have folks that move in to our area who are homeless or become homeless while they're here, find housing through our services, eventually move to a Section 8 voucher, become permanently housed, working in the community, and then eventually go on to buy their own homes. And we do see those kind of success stories quite frequently, and it's really encouraging to see. And believe me, we have our share of revolving door cases as well, where folks come in, you think you found solutions for them, they start to work on those solutions, and then 6 months later they're kind of back in the same straits. But we continue to work with them to try to find solutions that will work for them in the long term. And then, of course, there are folks who, for whatever reason, disability or by age or whatever the situation might be, they're not able to really gain the kind of income they need to live. And so we try to connect them to the resources that they need in order to at least be stabilized and be able to live permanently in Whitman County, if that's possible. So I just spewed a whole lot of information at you all. And Gary, I also didn't want to forget to thank you for, so I don't know if you saw in the paper, but we had a former employee who committed a crime against us, some theft of funds from our agency. And the police department worked with our staff very closely to find out what was going on and then to make those charges, take them to the prosecutor's office, and so we're in the process of prosecuting that case. And so that's a real encouragement. Not only do we look to the police department for help with placing some of these folks that are hard to place, but they've also got our back when it comes to crimes committed against our agents. So I want to thank you for the work on that. So with that, I didn't really want to just keep spewing, but I would entertain any questions that you might have for me that I will try to answer, and if I can't, I'll certainly get the answer for you and get back to you with those answers. Anything I can help you understand?
What's the structure and history of your organization? Is it a nonprofit? Is it...
Good question. Yeah, we're a 501c3 charitable organization, so we're a private nonprofit. But about 90% of our funding is either through state, county, or federal funding. So we do lean on those grants to provide the services we provide. But because we are a private nonprofit, that gives us ability to be a lot more flexible in how we can shape our programming. So if we have a fund, for instance, the Consolidated Homeless Grant comes from the state, we have some rigid policy that we have to follow to use those funds, but we also have the Community Relief Fund, which we helped local groups put that funding together, and we administer that, and that's how we're able to have the police department put folks into hotels short-term. And as a nonprofit, we're able to do that, whereas some federal and state agencies would not have that kind of flexibility. Yeah.
How long has your organization been around?
So we've been around 30 years, and in fact, I had hoped to bring you our first printing of our 30-year anniversary publication, but it won't be delivered till tomorrow. But we've been around for 30 years. So in 1988, Judy Allen actually was working with the county in a planning position, saw the need, and just started helping people, and pretty soon formed, that was in the early 80s, and then formed Community Action Center, basically doing the same thing, mostly housing focused at the time, and then eventually also saw the need for food focus and started that part of the work as well. So we've seen ups and downs, we've seen ebbs and flows. During ARA, we had more money than we could spend because of the money that came down to us just recently. But it really helped us to build capacity in some of our weatherization programming and some of the other housing programming that we otherwise probably wouldn't have had opportunity to build. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
I'd like to compliment both the Community Action Center and the Pullman Police Department. I've got a disabled son, and rents are very high in
Yes.
Pullman, and you people have helped us out for, gosh, 10 years,
Oh, that's
15
great.
years, I don't know. And with my son's problems, a lot of leeches get on him.
Right.
The police department has taken care of those several times, and I appreciate both of you.
Oh, great. That's good to hear. That's encouraging. Yeah, I was at coffee with somebody once, and they were asking about the work that I do, and I said, my work is mostly administrative, and so I don't get to really see the results as much, and so it's hard for me to go home at the end of the day and say, yeah, look what I did. Kind of like if you were building a house or doing something with your hands, you could say, hey, I built that. Well, as I was sharing that, this person sitting at the table spoke up and said, you need to know, I'm the result of your work. I was homeless. I was a domestic violence victim, moved to the Pullman area to escape that, got into permanent housing. Now I have a job. Now I'm successful, and it's because of the work of Community Action and ATVP that I'm able to be here. So it was like, wow, that's pretty impressive. That's nice.
With,
Nice to hear.
The two groups combined, he's pretty independent.
That's great.
Ironically, he thinks Pullman is terrible. He's got to go somewhere else. It's the best place in the world he could be.
No, this has got to be one of the most generous communities I've ever seen in my life. Yeah. Any other questions that I can help you with?
Well, I work for the Pullman School District, and I think one of the challenges we face, and we have some regulations we have to follow along the lines of McKinney-Vento, which is a great act that is designed to help students in homeless situations. But, the challenge we have in Pullman is people say, well, we don't have homeless people because it's not what you think. It's not what you see in Spokane. It's not
Right.
what you see in Seattle.
Correct.
But they're there. Those kids and those families are there.
Yep.
What do you guys do? What's your working relationship with Family Promise? if you could talk about that
Sure.
a little bit, and maybe explain if they don't know what Family Promise is.
Yeah, so Family Promise is a faith-based group of organizations, churches really, that voluntarily put up homeless families. And I believe it has to be families that they work with. I don't think that they work with single individuals. And they'll actually house those folks in churches locally for a short duration of time. I think the longest term is 6 months that they stay with them, while they're providing them other connections to services, helping them apply for jobs, whatever needs to be done. And we work very closely with Family Promise. Of course, their capacity isn't all that great. I mean, once they have a couple of families that they're working with, we really kind of have to wait for them to process through and then move out before we can refer another family there. But we do work very closely with them, and we connect. And we even, we try to work with both the Pullman School District and the Whitman County School Districts to get an understanding of the challenges they're facing with some of the homeless families, because those are the ones that typically are not the traditional definition of homeless, but the folks living out of their cars. Kids are, living in doubling up conditions that really is not conducive to good learning, and they're usually not eating well, and there's a whole host of issues that arise in those circumstances. So we try to work with those folks and get referrals to help them make connections to other resources as well. And really there's a pretty close-knit group, not just in Pullman, but throughout Whitman County, of service agencies that really try to meet together regularly and find out, kind of get their ear to the ground, so to speak, on what's happening in the community and how to best provide solutions to what they're facing. And believe me, as you know, families face a whole array of issues. If somebody has a medical issue in the family and they're also underemployed or not making enough to even take care of the basic needs, and then you add medical issues on top of that, it really becomes untenable for families. And so if we can make connections to just a few resources to relieve that, that can make a huge difference for families.
And just to let you know, if we have a student, let's say we have a student who's living in Pullman School District student, and all of a sudden they become homeless, but now their housing, whatever it might be, is in Clarkston. It's our responsibility, working with those other school districts, to figure out a way to allow that family, that student, if they choose to continue to stay in their home school.
Right.
So we've had situations where sometimes Clarkston will bring that student up to the board with Colton. Colton will bring that student to our board, and then we'll take that student to school, because we all know that continuity of school for that student is going to be crucial to their success. So that's one of the stipulations of the McKinney-Vento, is to allow that student to continue to attend their original school.
Yeah, which gives them a comfortable place to continue. I mean, they have enough challenges, right, getting their
Absolutely,
education,
yeah.
so
Yeah.
let's try to minimize those. I think that's a great policy.
So a couple of things, but so I noticed you mentioned so for the emergency funds and stuff is police and faith community. So you mentioned Family Promise. Are there other people in the faith community that you regularly work with? Or?
Yeah, typically, that doesn't happen as often or as frequently, but pastors and church leaders can make a placement with the housing vouchers to get folks into temporary crisis shelter. But typically, they'll call the police department because they're more familiar with where to take folks and what's going to be available. So usually, and it's been great for the faith community, because what we had before was we had folks who would basically go church to church to church, trying to knock the door down. And now if they just make that call for the police department to come and help them, or us if it's during the week, then we can usually get to longer term solutions sooner, or we can find out if, maybe this isn't the place for them to really work out the issues that they're facing. And typically, that's what we'll find is folks think about your own families and the network of friends and family that you have. Not all the time is your family local to you, right? So if we find out what can work, and then we make contact with the family and decide that, yeah, they would be willing to help, sometimes that's the best solution. And, people will often accuse us of shipping the problem out of the area, and that really isn't the goal. The goal is, let's make a connection to resources that will work for the families, and not have them be in a revolving door here, because there aren't any long-term networked resources for them to access. So it's really important to make that connection in the longer term.
And so when it comes to like homeless people, and so do you, pretty much you'll interact with ones who either approach you or the police department finds out about and sends your way? Is that pretty much the way it goes, or?
Yes, and we'll also, if one of my homeless housing solution staff sees somebody on the street,
Oh,
they'll
okay.
stop and ask them and try to figure out what's going on, as the police will. I mean,
Yeah.
I think we really care about, what's going on with these folks, and how do we best help them. And sometimes giving them $20 isn't the best solution. Sometimes it is, but for us to make that contact and have a conversation and try to find out what the story is the first step. And whether or not they're willing to continue from there is that's up to the individual or to the family. But we will go out. In fact, we get phone calls quite frequently. Hey, there's a homeless person down by Rainy Park. And oftentimes we'll send somebody down there, or if it's not going to work for us to do it, we'll make a call to the police department and see if they're willing to at least drive by and have a conversation. Yeah.
You'd mentioned the dental, is that on Bishop Boulevard there?
Correct, yeah, and the old Fireside Grill.
And so is that like catered to people who have less money, or
Correct.
how does that work?
Yeah, so they will take any patients, but they're set up to take Medicaid patients primarily, because they've worked out a way for them to do that on a sustainable basis. So, but they will take anybody, and uninsured folks are welcome to go down there as well. But that's their primary market, and really we don't have any dental providers in the area who are taking new Medicaid patients at all. So, and we don't have enough dental providers in the area anyway. For just period. So this is a great situation for folks who otherwise wouldn't have medical or dental care. And then we also helped to launch the Palouse Free Clinic in 2014 to help folks maybe who are underinsured or not insured, or folks who just can't navigate the typical health network system to come and get care, and it's all provided by volunteer providers. So that's been a great help to the community as well. They're not open that frequently, but they make a huge impact in that community where medical care is very expensive and difficult for them to access.
I'm always surprised when I see Whitman County listed highest or very high among all Washington counties in poverty rates and so on. Is that the indigenous population, or is that because we have a lot of poor students?
So the response is yes, it's the whole universe of folks who are in the county, so that would include our student population. But when you adjust, actually our poverty rate went down in this most recent report.
But it's still very high, isn't it?
It was at 32, it dropped to like 27, I think is what it is. Which is very high. When you adjust the student population out, we're still at like 16 or 17%, which is about 6 or 7 points higher than the average for the state of Washington. So we still have a very high poverty rate in terms
Where
of
do
the
we
overall.
rank among counties, do you know?
With the student population in there, we're like number 2 in the state of Washington. I don't know what we are
It's
nationwide.
kind of shocking to me.
Yeah, it is. And you don't, that's another thing. You don't really see that necessarily. But I have to tell you, the working poor are all around us. They're the folks who are serving us in the restaurants, who are working in the grocery stores, who, they're working on the line at SEL or wherever. And so their income just is at that lower level. But they're still working, and they're trying to make a living here in Whitman County, and it's tough. It really is tough. So
Well, I'm always impressed with when you talk to somebody at the hub that's working in one of the counters there or whatever.
yeah,
They never live in Pullman. They always live in Potlatch.
I can't afford to live in
the
Pullman.
Lewiston, or whatever, and they
Yeah.
commute,
Yep.
which is kind of dangerous in the winter.
Yeah, it's a bad situation, but it is very typical. Our affordable housing in Pullman is really tough to find. There just isn't a lot of it. And so we do have a lot of folks. Half of my staff don't live in Pullman. They work in Pullman, but they live everywhere else around us because they really can't afford to live here, or they can't find what they're looking for. So, yeah, it's a tough problem, so. We could talk all night, it sounds like.
Can you talk about the housing project?
Yeah, so that's a great segue into that, actually. Because of the lack of affordable housing units, we have a project that's in the works right now that we'll start actually pushing dirt probably in February or March of next year. We're going to open up a place with 56 units of affordable housing, and actually we have set aside units for homeless housing because we don't have a crisis shelter other than ATVP has a shelter, and we have these vouchers to get people in hotels, but we really don't have emergency housing for short-term that can be converted into longer-term or permanent housing. So part of our solution was to set aside about 10 or 12 of these 56 units that we're building here in Pullman to actually house folks who are coming out of homelessness. Now, whether we can fill those with homeless people or not, I mean, the 79 that you're seeing on here looks like we probably can. If there aren't homeless folks enough to actually house those units, we can open it up to other populations, and we can keep those units filled. But it's 56 units just south and east of the hospital. So if you know where the new business park development is out there by the cemetery, if you drive east through that all the way to the end, we're at the very end across that little retaining pond there. We have 5 acres that are going to be developed starting next year. And that's been actually about a 3-year process to get that project funded, planned, and now we actually have plans at the building department for permits to be reviewed, and we'll hopefully I'm sure we'll get a list of revisions because that's how it works. But then we'll hopefully launch then in March of next year and start construction. So pretty exciting. It's about a $11 million project, but it'll provide permanent and long-term housing to a lot of families who will need it. And we will prioritize seniors, those with disabilities, those who are coming out of homelessness. I'm sure there's veterans. There's a long list of preferential eligibility that we look at, and so that'll be a great way for us to be able to address some of those hard-to-house populations. I don't know if that's enough, but yeah.
Those family-sized units or just like single apartment kind of?
It'll be a range. So we have a real shortage of 1- and 2-bedroom units in the area. So we did build a few of those into those plans. And then probably 50% or more are 3- to 4-bedroom units. So we have a variety, but we never had the 1- and 2-bedroom variety really built in this area. And so we were really careful to make sure we got a few of those units in because that's a high need. We'll get a lot of families that are single parent with 1 child, kind of families where a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom is the optimal situation. And if you go look online, try to find that kind of housing, you just can't find it. Or you can't find it affordably. It's set up for student housing, which tends to be a little bit higher cost to get housed, as I'm sure you've probably experienced.
I have a question about that. So CIC was able to send 50 application from 79. So my
Right.
question about these 29, what is the plan for them? If they are any organization can help them if CIC wasn't able to help them. So what
Right,
is
so that could be for a variety, I kind of quickly went through that. It could be for a variety of reasons. One would be that they're actually not going to stay local, so they're transient family that, we help find other resources, and then they are able to move out of the area, or they're just coming through and not really seeking assistance. They come in and they talk to us, and then we talk with them, and they say, you know what, I think I'm just going to go to my mom's place down in wherever, and off they go. Some folks also, their situation is such that they're not eligible for whatever funding or resources we may have. So, for instance, they may have a job and have income, but they're over income, but they just haven't saved resources in order to get into permanent housing. So we work with them to try to do that, but we can't really access our funding for them because they're really not eligible at that point. So we do try to work, all the applications get that one-on-one to kind of assess what they need and work with them. Sometimes it's eligibility, sometimes it's the fact that they're just not going to stay local or they're moving through the area. Or it might be that they just find some other resource or some other solution for their situation. I don't know if that helps. I should probably, it would be great for me to go through and look at some of those one by one, because I don't have a list of all the variables, but that would be great for me to know, because it is interesting that 30 of the 80 really we weren't able to provide services, and I know that they're legitimate, but the question is, exactly what's going on would be good to know.
I would add too that sometimes we come into contact with people that they don't want the help.
Exactly.
They could use the help, but they don't want it.
Right. Now, these were applicants, but some applicant is probably, it means that they came in our doors and talked to us. Doesn't necessarily mean that they filled out forms to make application to the funding that we have. So it could be like Gary just shared, they come in, we talk with them, and they say, nah, I don't need this. And we've had that before. We've had folks come in and say, I really just need some food, and so we'll help them with some food, and then we never see them again. So that happens.
What would you say is the biggest need as far as this homelessness and stuff right now?
That's a really good question. Homelessness really starts with the availability and accessibility of affordable housing. Yeah. So if you trace homelessness back to its basics, there's a number of reasons, events that might happen in a person's life where they become homeless, but not having the inventory of housing that's affordable to live in is, to me, crucial to actually address that at a root level. Obviously, there's a whole, again, constellation of issues that households face, and if you've got medical issues or other issues, that can obviously exacerbate what's already a tough situation. But to me, I think the biggest need, and that's why we're actually building that housing project right now, is just the availability of housing that is accessible for folks, because just building it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be able to afford to live there. And we have plenty of development in the area of new apartments, for instance, but they're not really designed for folks of all income strata to have access to. So student housing doesn't really help address that homeless population in need. So I guess if I had to boil it down, that's what I would say, just the inventory or lack of it, of affordable housing and especially in Pullman. Yeah. Beyond Pullman, there's probably a little bit more affordability, but then there are other transportation issues and access to service issues and other things that arise for households. But for Pullman, I would say that affordability of and inventory of affordable housing is really key, critical. So we'd love to work with developers who could maybe look a little bit past the profit motive and a little bit more towards building something better for our community and strengthening it, and maybe share in some of that process to be able to provide some more inventory of housing. And I think we're starting to have conversations that might lead to that in the near future, but we'll keep working at it. Yeah, it's been our pleasure and opportunity to work with the Pullman 2040 group. We're leading out the housing security projects for that, and that's been a great opportunity. And we're also working with another group for a Palouse area housing needs assessment, sitting on that steering committee and trying to figure out what we can do longer term that's community wide and not necessarily somebody having to just keep going back to the same well for solutions, but working together for solutions that are more community built. So, yeah. That's our hope.
One thing has come to my attention some just because I've employed some of these people is I've run into a few like single dads that have custody of their kids and stuff,
Right.
and my impression is they struggle some because they've got to juggle. I'm sure this goes for single moms too, but
Right.
they got to juggle their kids, trying to work, and they just can't get the same hours in that say
Right.
a single guy,
Right.
or even a married guy.
Yeah, and what happens when the parent-teacher conference comes up, or what happens when, all those things.
Yeah, they
that-
got to go pick their kids up from
Exactly.
school.
Or a kid gets sick and they have to
Exactly.
stay home.
Yeah.
And they may or may not have sick leave.
Exactly.
And if they don't work, they don't get paid.
Exactly.
That type of situation.
Yeah, and that kind of cycle can escalate very quickly for folks, and then pretty soon they're finding themselves either homeless or nearly homeless
Yeah.
because they just can't keep up with all the challenges that they're facing. And yeah, I think single parenthood is a tough one because, it's not that people aren't willing, that's just,
Right.
there's just a lot of balls to juggle. And
Yeah.
so we try to help folks figure out how to keep those balls in the air if we can. Can't always help,
Yeah.
but one of the things we can do is help people by letting them know that there are folks who can navigate this and they'll help you navigate it as well. And that's what we try to do.
Any other questions? Well, I really appreciate you coming, and
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. I really do appreciate being able to speak to you all. And please, I think you have my contact information, or certainly Chief Jenkins can get it for you. But I'm happy to talk with you all and answer any questions. Please come up and visit Community Action sometime. We'll show you around and show you what we're doing up there. And hope to look forward to seeing you at the ribbon cutting and groundbreaking ceremony for our housing project out here. That'll be fun next year. So thank you very much.
so next thing says committee guidelines. I see that Darby has included a printed copy here.
Yeah,
It has the changes we made last time, right?
the only change that I put in there is the addition of the GPSA constituency. I did not do anything yet with the vice chair
Right,
thing. And then we didn't make any other decisions yet. I was just gonna make all those changes at one time, so.
Sounds good. And so that we're basically tabling for next meeting because the subcommittee hasn't met, so. We gotta try and get that done this coming month, so. Police department, so I guess on to Gary for the police department update.
All right. So we're still have five vacancies. We have the 3 additional police officer positions plus 2 recent vacancies, so we need to hire 5. We are doing finalizing backgrounds on 2 right now from some interviews that were recently held, and then we're going to be with the continuous recruitment, we have additional interviews scheduled later this month. So if we are able to hire the 2 that we are currently doing backgrounds on, then we'll have 3 more to go. But we do know we're going to have additional people retiring in the next couple of years, so we'll continue to do a continuous recruitment and keep a valid list. Our code enforcement officer interviews were in September, and Sergeant Sam Sorum, who recently retired, decided retirement wasn't quite for him, so he applied for code enforcement officer, and we hired Sam Sorum back, and so we found out it's twice the work but less responsibility, so he's liking it. We are also the Whitman County Sheriff's Office runs a reserve academy, and they haven't run one for a couple of years just because neither the county nor us have had enough applicants. So this year, they are going to run an academy, and we have one person right now that's in background for that. And so if he passes the background, then we'll have someone in the Reserve Officer Academy. And the Reserve Officer is a completely volunteer position that someone goes through the Reserve Officer Academy, then comes back to the police department, goes through our training program, and they essentially serve as a second officer. Now, over time and training, they can reach a level where they're a level 1 reserve. And so Dennis Pratt is an example of that. He's been a reserve officer for a while and has a lot of experience in training, so he can go out on his own and serve as a police officer. So he volunteers probably close to 1,000 hours a year
Wow, yeah.
to the police department, and he's a good police officer. So that's a valuable resource. So we're looking to add on to our reserve program. We're continuing through the budget process. This year, we're starting to do a 2-year budget. Adam Lincoln, our city administrator, has changed that process from a 1-year to a 2-year budget. So we've submitted proposals for 2019 and 2020. We will have it finalized to go to council by October 30th. And so in my budget, council has already approved the 3 additional officers, and I'm proposing an additional code enforcement officer, which will take us from 3 to 4. And then that position will actually be a supervisory position, so that they can actually have their own unit with a supervisor. And so far, it looks like that's going to go through. So that will be a big plus. We're revamping a little bit about how we handle code enforcement issues. In the past, it's been kind of spread out from different departments in the city between police and planning and public works and community improvement coordinator. And so we're trying to make it less complicated and have as much as we can under the police department as possible, so that it will help with coordination of all of the code enforcement efforts throughout the city. And so there's additional work that our staff is going to be doing, and so that's one of the reasons we're adding on to the code enforcement officer positions. Let's see here. We've had some home football games, and I don't recall if I reported this before, but one of the things that we're doing, we've been working every year with athletics to try to improve the post-game traffic and try to get people out of town as quickly and safely as possible. And we have made improvements over the years. This year, one of the new things that we're doing is WSU printed up a little postcard map of alternate routes out of the city. Because what happens is a lot of cars will come down Main Street and all get over into that right-hand lane to go on to Davis Way. There's actually 2 other ways to get out onto 195, and that's to go straight on Main out to OY and then to 195, or to turn left on Grand and then hit where 195 meets Grand in the south end of town. So they're handing those, they're standing along the cars that are stopped waiting for traffic on Main Street, handing the cards and say, by the way, there's 2 other ways you can go, and about 75% of the cars are actually getting in a different lane. So we're hoping that over a few games, we'll have enough people that have learned the new alternate route that it'll help with the traffic after the games.
Although there's probably some people that right after the game, you really don't want them to drive, rather than.
Yes, well, they're usually in the tailgating section anyways. At the October 2nd council meeting, we presented an Outstanding Citizen Award to Rex Riggs, who it was a couple of months ago, our officers were on a traffic stop near Safeway at about 6 in the morning, and they contacted a couple people in what appeared to be a suspicious activity. And in talking to one of the passengers, he gave a name and information. Officers checked it and it turned out to be false. And when he was confronted with that, he took off running. So they were chasing him and went over by a ravine. Well, Rex Riggs was driving to work at WSU, saw this happening, stopped his car, jumped out, and tackled the guy and they ended up down in the ravine. I looked at the officer's body cam videos to see if I could get a good picture of the tackle. I could turn it over to Coach Leach and see if he can walk over. I didn't get that, but I did get from the officer after he got the guy in custody and started walking back up, and then you could see Rex Rick standing there completely covered with mud after wrestling with this guy. So anyway, that's not action that we recommend for people to do, but since he did it, we wanted to recognize him, so we presented him an award to him. Last week on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, our insurance carrier, which is WCIA, they regularly provide training in different areas of risk management, essentially, for cities throughout the state. And they have a 3-section supervisory course that they put on. And so the city got them to come to Pullman and put on all 3 sections over a 3-day period at the end of last week. For all of the city, anybody that's was a supervisor on up, so all of supervisors and management attended this training put on by the insurance carrier, and it was good training for everyone. And I'll mention that it's been in the press, I know, about the investigation that's going on. Washington State Patrol is investigating allegations made against one of our police sergeants, and it was recently reported that that report has been completed and turned over to the Whitman County Prosecuting Attorney's Office. I've been in contact with the prosecuting attorney to find out what the timeline is for any kind of decision on that, and at this point he's unable to give me one. So I'll keep you posted on that, but more than likely you'll see something, I would suspect, in the press before our next meeting.
Do you have access to the report?
I do.
So regardless of what the prosecutor does, though, you have a decision to make.
Right, so what happens now, we do have a copy of the report, and completely independent of whatever happens with the Cribble side of it, we conduct our own internal investigation. A lot of, we will end up using a lot of what Washington State Patrol has done as far as their investigation goes, but if we need to re-interview someone or interview someone that wasn't interviewed, we'll do that, and then make a decision as an employer about whether we need to take any action or not. And that's all I've got.
You mentioned like code enforcement, trying to bring it as much as possible under the police department and stuff. So like, just take for example, like I know years ago we used to operate out of residential and our business, and one time there was complaints about that because we were getting sort of big for it, and so the city planning sent us a letter and said blah 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 whatever. Is that like going to move over to your side, or is planning still doing that?
I'm sorry, that's what in a residential area?
Well, we were running a business out of a residential area,
Oh.
for example, you know.
Well, actually, those types of things are going to probably go more to our city clerk. There's going to be some things that we've been doing that actually is better in their purview.
That was city planning that sent us a letter, for example. And so that might stay that way then, probably, or?
Right.
Okay.
Right, but we can provide assistance since we're the ones that are out there and are used to doing investigations essentially. But so one example, I guess, would be snow removal.
Yeah.
So in the past, complaints would come in and go to the community improvement coordinator, and he would either try to make phone calls to where the complaints were made about, or go out and put a door hanger or contact people directly. And you know, there wasn't very effective. So the code enforcement officers are going to take that on. We're putting together some information right now that we're going to send out to landlords and tenants, and we're putting together a public safety or public service announcement to go on the radio to talk about some of these new things that we're going to be involved in. So snow removal, trash can removal,
Yeah.
vegetation covering the sidewalk.
Yeah.
So those types of things that you wouldn't think are necessarily police-related, but our code enforcement officers are going to take those kinds of things on. And we're working with, in the Town Gown Collaborative, subcommittee is called College Hill Matters, that I'm on, and Kevin Gardis from Public Works Director is on it as well. So there's a lot of things that are coming to our attention about issues that are on College Hill, but not, and of course, our efforts will not be primarily just focused on College Hill because we have the whole city to deal with. But that's kind of like a very a microcosm, I guess,
Yeah.
of the rest of the city, and and so a lot of the problems stand out more there. So that's one of the areas that we're starting to work on, and to get a feel for what we can and can't do, and then we can spread it to the rest of the city as well.
Thank you. Any other questions on that? Okay. Constituency poll, so I guess we'll start that end and run around. You just say your name and what you represent and say, I don't have anything to say. Or if you have something to say, you can say it.
My name is Amira and I represent the Graduate and Professional Student Association at WSU, and I don't have anything to say.
Greg Wilson, alternate for Pioneer Hill. I don't have anything to say.
Joe Thornton, Pullman Schools, nothing to say.
Jordan Sykes, Associated Students of Washington State University, and I don't have anything to say.
Riley McNulty, alternate for ASWSU, and I don't have anything to say.
Richard Hume, Pioneer Hill. I have something to say. A constituent, it caught me when I was walking my dog on Professional Mall Boulevard. He's very attached to his cat, and his cat was evidently attacked by a coyote, somehow got out of there without getting eaten. It was down by the river there somewhere, and got back, and he's been recovering, the cat, for a couple of weeks, and the constituent has a $5,000 vet bill. What is our policy toward coyotes? By the way, when I was walking the dog the other day, a week or two ago, a coyote ran right across both our lawns.
Well,
They're
don't
out
you
there.
remember what day you had the cops show up at my house because there was a coyote stuck on my fence for
That was a couple
hours?
years ago. And the cops got it out of there very well, yeah.
Very effectively. 5 a.m. the cops not gonna shoot for it.
I'm kind of torn. I'm a big animal lover. I don't necessarily want coyotes killed. On the other hand, I don't want cats eaten either. What do we do? Do we do anything? Do we have a policy?
We don't really have a
Call
policy,
the
and
code enforcer.
we're also animal control officers. You know, I worked on this issue extensively when I worked in Southern California, because where we were located, we were just at the base of some foothills, and we had a significant coyote issue. And so we worked with California Department of Fish and Game on that, and looked at a number of different potential resolutions. And really, the only thing that's effective is just not leaving food out that might attract them. Even trying to catch them and relocate them, or even killing them, it's not going to make the problem go away. Obviously, if you or one of your animals is being threatened, then you need to take whatever action you need to protect yourselves and your property. But to go out and just and start killing coyotes isn't going to help the problem at all anyway. So it's really just a matter of it's similar, I guess, to a bear problem. Is you just try to limit what can be accessed by the animal, and not try to avoid
Well, this
attracting them.
fellow is very attached to his cat, and I don't think the cat will approve, but it's going to become a house cat, I guess.
I'm Angie Center, and I'm the WSU faculty staff representative. President Schultz and Provost Bernardo have just finished their town hall discussions, so they come to every college on campus and the branch campuses and give us an annual report and let us know where we're at the Drive to 25. He had some pretty interesting things to say in terms of budget and the new freshman population. So if you haven't seen that or had access to that, you just go onto WSU's main page and Google Town Hall, and he has a text version of his report there.
Angelo Brown, multicultural. I have nothing to say.
Tips off, business security, I don't have anything to say.
Tarek Mujassem, multicultural from Bora, I don't have anything to say.
Thank you for the email, by the way, for sending that.
Phyllis Stallcop, Sunnyside representative, and I too have nothing.
Nathan Dean, alternative for a parent of Pullman School District and nothing for the constituency on my side.
Well, everything must be running perfectly in the city. That's the only conclusion I can draw.
Okay, hopefully next time we'll have the subcommittee will have some committee, some recommendations. But, I guess, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Before we do that, Eric,
go ahead.
why don't we talk about our next meeting? The
Oh.
date that it's scheduled is November 12th,
Right.
which I think is Veterans Day holiday, which is the 11th, but I think that's the observed holiday. So I don't know if this committee still wants to meet or not. I'm actually going to be at a conference, but if we still have a meeting, I can send a representative. The other if we don't want to hold it, then we can either move it up a week to the 5th or a week back to the 19th.
Or we can,
Or skip.
Or we, yeah. Put one at the end of November and combine the December, November one.
Sounds like a motion, Nathan.
Yeah.
Second.
Yeah, I'm in for either skipping
Or skipping November?
Skipping or just
Did you
putting
have
one
any-
in the middle.
Did you have anything scheduled for then?
I don't have anything scheduled yet.
Okay.
So your thought is to maybe have one, maybe a little bit later in November that serves for.
Or we can
November
just
and
skip it if
December?
that's easier, since everybody knows this calendar day, so. Yeah, I think skipping, that's my motion.
I second.
Yeah.
You want to run with that, or?
Well, I think it's up for a vote, unless there's a discussion.
What are we voting on, skipping November?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. So everyone who's in favor of skipping November, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. So what would that make the next day? 10th?
December 10th.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess the next meeting will be December 10th.
Subcommittee has plenty of time to get their words
That's
now.
Yeah, right. So,
Do you want me to schedule a presenter for December?
probably, as far as I know, that'd be good. I mean, you can always email Corey and see if she has anything to say about it, but.
Okay.
Do,
The ones that we had left on our list
Yeah.
are College Hill Association, the DARE School Resource Officer Program, Shane Emerson to talk about College Hill officer duties, the regional drugs, and Annie Pillars, the Whitman County Coroner.
Sounds like there's plenty there.
I figure out
Thinking, yeah.
what's that?
I think that's finals week. Is that finals week?
It is finals week, yeah.
So I don't know if everybody from the students will be able to make that one or not. So I don't know if we want to do it. Not do a College Hill one, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Not sure if we want to do what.
Huh?
Not sure if we want to do what.
Do a College
How
Hill
about since we're-
presentation if they might not be able to make it.
Since we're canceling November, what do you think about having, instead of doing December 10th? Because I'm not going to be here on December 10th. How does December 3rd, does anybody
Move it
know
up.
their calendars enough to say whether December 3rd is good? We can kind of hold a joint November-December meeting.
I mean, I'm good with that, but.
That'd be fine.
It's fine.
Sounds good.
And then how about if we do the,
That's Hanukkah.
is it?
I don't know what day on it is. It's the first one, or I'm not Jewish. It's just on my calendar. Probably the first day, I'm guessing.
What do you think about
The third is fine with me.
Third is fine.
Yeah. About the College Hill officer duties, is that a good topic for December?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that Shane?
Shane? Yep.
That'd be great.
He's always a nice guy. He's nice, so.
We'll do it.
Okay. Anything else, or?
By the way, he's one of the officers that helped us out a lot when I mentioned getting hangers-on with our son.
So I see Darby sent me a text message at 5:29.
We were worrying just a little bit about whether.
So, well, and just so you know, so Greg Wilson is a psychologist, and he does psychological exams on all of our prospective employees when they get far enough in their background that it looks like we may consider hiring them. And so there were the 2 prospective employees that we were just, he came to meet me before the meeting, and we got done just in time.
1 minute to spare.
Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So move.
Everyone in favor say aye.
Aye.
Done.